Respect transparency.
Question number 3, Paul Goldsmith.
My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, how will the government's program for delivering better public services within tight financial constraints contribute to the government's economic plan?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, it will contribute in a couple of ways. The first is the public sector makes up about a quarter of the New Zealand economy, so it makes a large contribution to our economic performance. Increases in productivity and skills in the public sector will benefit the whole economy, as well as those New Zealanders who expect public services to be maintained, even though there are tight financial constraints.
Paul Goldsmith.
Supplementary. What specific steps is the government taking to ensure the public service is more innovative, efficient and focused on delivering results?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, with the size and complexity of the public sector, the government's been taking a large number of steps since it took office back in 2008. But more recently, the Prime Minister announced 3 changes that will sharpen the public sector's focus on delivering better services for New Zealanders. The Prime Minister has set 10 challenging and specific results for the public sector to achieve over the next 3 to 5 years. The government has lowered the cap on full-time equivalent positions in core government administration and created a single dedicated government department that will service business, indicatively called the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment.
Chris Hipkins.
A supplementary to the Minister, does he agree with the conclusions of the Better Public Service Advisory Group that better delivery of public services requires a clear understanding of the government's priorities? And if so, which set of priorities does the government want the public sector to focus on? The National Party's 6-point Brighter Future Plan, the revised 6-point Brighter Future Plan with 41 actions, National's 120-point action plan, the 4 priorities in the speech from the throne, the Prime Minister's 10-point plan, Stephen Joyce's 8-point plan, Nick Smith's 8-point plan, Bill English's 5 themes for government priorities, or any of the other multiple action plans, strategies and priority lists the government's releasing? Or will he simply admit that if the government can't even get its own priorities set out straight, how on earth is the public sector supposed to follow them?
The Honourable Bill English.
What a busy government, no doubt about that. The member might need... The member, of course, will understand that, for instance, the Ministry for the Environment will be focusing on things we want to achieve with respect to natural resources. That's logical enough, and they'll be a bit different than what the Department of Social Welfare is focusing on. What I can tell the member is no government, including the previous Labor government, has put itself to the test with respect to the 10 results that the Prime Minister announced last week. They will enable us to get to grips with long-running difficult issues in New Zealand, such as crime, reoffending rates, violence to children and long-term welfare dependency. And I welcome the member's participation in providing ideas about how we can achieve those results better.
Paul Goldsmith.
To the Minister, what will be the main focus of the 10 results set by the Prime Minister for the public sector?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the main focus of those results is to simply test whether the tax paid over by taxpayers and spent by government actually makes a difference. It's one thing to stand around wringing hands and writing strategies like the last Labor government did. It's another thing to test whether all our actions and all our funding are actually leading to change. Because the fact is, under the previous government, with a huge upsurge in spending, many of our social problems got worse, not better.
Ms Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Supplementary. Has the Minister seen reports that the Treasury, which has no frontline staff, has increased its staff numbers by over 13% in the last 3 years, and the number of staff earning over $100,000 at the Treasury has increased by 8%, and that in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, which coincidentally also has no frontline staff, personnel costs have increased by over 13%, and they had an $800,000 budget blowout? And why is it that his department and the Prime Minister's department are growing fatter while the rest of the public service, which provides genuine frontline public services, are having their funding cut?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the member's last statement is wrong, but I could point out to him that Treasury and DPMC have overseen a fairly significant event called the Christchurch earthquake, which has required the deployment, well, $9.5 billion of public money, and if Treasury have been able to supervise that for the addition of a few staff, then they're doing an extremely good job.
Paul Goldsmith.
Supplementary to the Minister, how will progress towards meeting each of the public service targets be measured?
The Honourable Bill English.
Speaker. Well, Mr Speaker, it's important to measure our progress because good intentions simply aren't enough. It's not enough to say we care about children or enough to say we think welfare dependency is a problem. So the results the Prime Minister has announced will require a measurable and stretching targets. They will be public, and the public will have the opportunity not just to monitor progress but actually to participate. For instance, having a safer environment for our children will require the neighbours to make as much of a contribution to that child's safety as government bureaucrats. It'll help us all understand our respective responsibilities.
Question number 4, the Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to